The room fell deathly silent as the sharp, mocking laughter of liberal journalist Claire Hensley cut through the air, her words aimed like daggers at Senator John Kennedy. It was a packed conference hall in Washington, D.C., filled with political elites, journalists, and curious onlookers, all gathered for a high-profile panel discussion on the state of American democracy. Kennedy, the folksy Louisiana senator known for his dry wit and unapologetic Southern charm, sat calmly in his chair, his weathered hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on Claire with a steady gaze that hinted at something deeper brewing beneath his composed exterior. The audience had been buzzing with anticipation, but no one could have predicted the explosive exchange that was about to unfold, a moment that would leave jaws dropped and hearts stirred, a story that would echo far beyond the walls of that room. Claire, a rising star in the media world with her polished demeanor and biting commentary, had built her reputation on challenging conservative figures with unrelenting scrutiny. At 34, she was ambitious, driven by a desire to prove herself in a cutthroat industry, but her personal life was a quiet struggle. Behind her confident smile lay the weight of a recent divorce, a crumbling relationship with her estranged teenage daughter, and a gnawing loneliness that fueled her need to dominate every conversation. Tonight, she saw Kennedy as her next target, a man whose traditional values and blunt style clashed with her progressive ideals. As the moderator handed her the microphone, she leaned forward, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Senator Kennedy, I've heard you speak about family values and hard work, but let's be real, your policies seem stuck in the 1950s. Do you even understand the modern world, or are you just playing the good old boy card for the cameras?" The crowd gasped, some chuckling nervously, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Kennedy didn't flinch. For a moment, he simply adjusted his glasses, the faint creak of his chair the only sound as he gathered his thoughts. At 73, he carried the weight of a lifetime, decades of public service, a beloved wife who had passed away from cancer 5 years prior, and a son who had struggled with addiction before finding redemption through faith and hard work. His life hadn't been easy, and his deep-rooted beliefs were forged in the fires of personal loss and resilience. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice low and deliberate, carrying the drawl of his Louisiana roots. "Ms. Hensley, I reckon I do understand the modern world, more than you might think. I've buried a wife I loved more than life itself, watched my boy fight demons that nearly took him from me, and spent years listening to folks who've been forgotten by people like you. Mockery's easy when you're sitting up there with your fancy degree and your big city lights, but it don't change the truth." The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement, others leaning forward, captivated by the raw emotion in his words. Claire, unprepared for the personal turn, felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She had expected a political rebuttal, not a glimpse into Kennedy's soul. Undeterred, she pressed on, her tone sharpening. "That's a touching story, Senator, but it doesn't excuse policies that hurt working families, policies you've supported that keep people trapped in poverty. How do you sleep at night?" The jab was meant to wound, and for a moment, it seemed to hit its mark. Kennedy's shoulders slumped slightly, and the room held its breath. But then, something shifted. He looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, and began to speak again, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I don't sleep easy some nights, Ms. Hensley," he admitted. "I lay awake thinking about the folks I've let down, the votes I wish I could take back. But I also think about the single mom in Baton Rouge who told me her kid's the first in their family to go to college because of a program I fought for. I think about the veterans I've visited in VA hospitals, men and women who gave everything and still struggle. I don't claim to have all the answers, Lord knows I don't, but I try. And if that's not good enough for you, well, I reckon I'll keep trying anyway." The vulnerability in his voice struck a chord, and the room grew so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Claire, for the first time, felt the sting of her own words, a realization dawning that her attack had uncovered not weakness, but a profound strength. The exchange didn't end there. As the panel continued, Claire found herself grappling with an internal conflict. She had come to dismantle Kennedy's credibility, but his honesty had shaken her. During a break, she approached him off stage, her usual confidence replaced by a hesitant sincerity. "Senator, I didn't expect that. I'm sorry if I crossed a line." Kennedy, ever the gentleman, offered a small smile. "No need to apologize, ma'am. We all fight our battles. Maybe we can learn something from each other." That moment sparked an unlikely dialogue. Over the next few weeks, Claire began researching Kennedy's record more deeply, uncovering initiatives he'd championed that aligned with some of her own values, support for rural healthcare, education reform. She reached out to him, and what started as a professional courtesy turned into a series of candid conversations. For Kennedy, the encounter was a chance to bridge a divide. He invited Claire to Louisiana, where she met the single mom he'd mentioned and visited a community center he'd helped fund. The experience softened her, and she began to see the man behind the politics. Meanwhile, Kennedy, inspired by Claire's tenacity, reflected on his own rigidity, opening himself to new perspectives. The challenges they faced, Claire's isolation and Kennedy's grief, found a strange resolution in their growing mutual respect. Claire even reconnected with her daughter, using the trip as a catalyst to mend their bond, while Kennedy found renewed purpose in mentoring young leaders. By the end of the month, Claire published an article titled, "A Senator's Lesson in Humility," detailing her journey and Kennedy's impact. The video of their initial clash went viral, but it was the story of their reconciliation that captivated millions. On a follow-up panel, they sat side by side, no longer adversaries but allies in a shared mission to listen and learn. As Kennedy closed the discussion, he looked out at the audience and said, "We don't have to agree on everything, but we can agree to care." That's where the real work begins. The room erupted in applause, and Claire, wiping a tear from her eye, nodded in agreement. The message was clear. In a world divided by ideology, empathy and dialogue could forge a path to healing, leaving an inspiring legacy that resonated long after the cameras stopped rolling.